All right, ready? Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us. So this is kind of an impromptu info session about the project being constructed on Plains Road. It's a memorial for veterans. And Patty had had really spearheaded a conversation. Dennis Doyle, the director of county planning. We spoke about the idea of having an info session or even a call, and then I said, well, why don't I just come down to New Paltz and have this conversation in person. I'm super grateful that he offered that. He brought Mark, the director of Veterans Affairs from the county. So they're both here and available to explain the project. But I'm gonna hand the microphone to Patty and she'll provide us with a little background. We'll have an opportunity to hear from Patty and from Dennis and Mark, and then take any questions. But we just want to clear the air and use this opportunity to meet in person. So
Great.
This is our microphone. So anyone who talks, we're just going to make sure that they're sitting near or standing near that microphone.
All right. Autumn, it registers if I'm talking? Yeah. Great. Okay. All right. I teach fairy tales, so forgive me if I go into the weeds sometimes, or at least go into storybook land. But I did want to have some conversation about how we all got into this room together, because I think it's kind of important. All of you know that the week before Christmas, suddenly there was an explosion of light at the cemetery. It was so intense and so bright that we were all shocked and dismayed by the quality of the light. I'm not exaggerating to say that it filled my bedroom, my living room, my driveway. When I went out onto my deck, I was blinded by the light. It was impossible. The glare was very serious. Serious enough that I went to bed with a migraine headache and a prayer, a very deep prayer, that this was some weird construction anomaly and that it would disappear. Though I couldn't imagine under what conditions those lights would ever be needed in that quantity and in that intensity. The next night, the lights reappeared. That's when I sent my note out to you and to supervisor and to the mayor, because I felt helpless in the face of what I was seeing. The mayor kindly, because I had the wrong address, being what I am, had the wrong address for the director, forwarded my note onto the proper address, and the director promptly responded. Mr. Doyle answered very quickly. And I would like, if I can, to respond. May I read your response? Thank you for the concern about the site lighting. We are going to turn the lighting off. Part of the problem is that the lights are now focused on a single spot horizontally, rather than on the individual flags as designed. We have asked our engineers to review the specifications for the lighting and will make any needed adjustments prior to project completion. A very effective and efficient email response. The lights were off, thank God. Well, for most of us, the holidays came, right? I was busy, you were busy, I'm sure you men were busy, and weeks went by. But I have to admit, I felt a continual unease that the problem could reappear. I'm sorry, I'm one of those people, if something bad happens, it just might happen again. So I was concerned about what might come next. And then a very odd thing happened. I found this. Where are you, Autumn? I found this. posted on the pole at the edge of my driveway. Do you all know what this is? You've all seen one, right? This is what New Paltz does when there is an issue before one of the boards that makes a decision about property. It's an announcement that's put out weeks before the event. And it has all the very important particulars. It's got time and date and place, and it's got the details of the request being made by the property owner for a special consideration. And it's on my property because I'm being affected. Not only that, I got an addressed letter to my home, addressed to Jeremiah and I, this time highlighted in yellow with the same exact details. There was an abundance of effort on the part of local government to make sure that I knew that something was going to happen to property that was going to affect me. Not only was I going to know about it, but I was going to be, more than I anticipated, invited to come and speak about it. Now, I could choose not to, but they were going out of their way to do it. And I have to tell you, standing in my kitchen with that letter with the yellow highlighting, I had this moment of profound gratitude for good government. I gotta say this to you guys, because it matters. It really matters. If local government and local bureaucracies respect me and respect my rights and tell me that I'm entitled, no, I'm invited to participate in something that will affect me, then I feel like I'm in good hands. You know, they say democracy depends on voters doing their job. Well, no, democracy depends on government doing its job. Both, you're right, absolutely, both. It's a two-sided street, right? So this is why I felt a little uncertain about Mr. Doyle's kind response. Not that he meant anything ill towards me, but that I thought it was incomplete. That what he didn't say in my note to me and by extension to all of you was that I will get back to you. I will tell you what we see. I will arrange a meeting to go over the new specs with you. So I did what I do. After the man in the truck with the hammer and the nails and the pink notices had done his job, I realized that I had to do my job. I had to remind people that there was more to this. Since government requires that, as you say, both sides do their job, then I'm going to say, hey, we have to talk. So I wrote a second note that included you and you. And I said, I asked, no, I begged to please, we have to talk about this. All of us are here tonight having fully known that at some point we're going to get out of this meeting into our cars and have to face terrible headlights on the way home. We're going to face blinding lights in the dark. We already know from personal experience what lights in the dark mean. And that's just the tip of the iceberg about what we're talking about tonight. The cemetery field has been dark for eons. We will get to discuss that issue among others tonight. And I'm hoping that we can keep it as civil and as honest and as straightforward as we can, both sides. And I expect that no less from us than I do from Mr. Doyle and the Planning and the Veteran Services Agency and from the mayor and from the supervisor. I cannot begin to tell you how much I value good governance and how much in this day and age I rely on it. So we're here to talk. And I've said what I said.
Sure, can you come closer?
I
just so
certainly
that,
can.
Brings up your voice.
So, thank you, Patty. We had a small presentation prepared. Does anyone want to see a presentation or do you want to basically? Okay, so no one, and let me put it this way, I got two shaking heads, no. Is there anybody going to raise their hand and say yes? Okay, so no presentation. It's like 7 slides, 8 slides. Okay, so I want to tell you how we got here. I want to tell you some of the design philosophy to use. And I want to also answer some of Patty's concerns relative to the amount of information that's been available in my response to her. And the first thing I want to start out in terms of my response is an apology. And the reason for that apology is that many of us just assume that we know we're going to get back to people. And sometimes we don't put it in emails. But my assumption was that whatever solution we came up with, that discussion was going to go back to the individual that sort of raised the issue to begin with. And so I really also want to thank the mayor for reaching out to us and suggesting a call. And when that happened, one of the first things I wanted to do is suggest a meeting so we could talk face to face, because I think it is good government to talk face to face. And I think it's very important for us to have these kinds of discussions and to address community concerns. And we all understand, and it's certainly my office, we've led the charge with respect to lighting and light trespass for years and years and years. And so we'll sort of try to address some of the lighting questions that have arisen. But if I can, I'd like to do just a short presentation. Is that okay? You want to pull that up? I'll be very quick. And I want to introduce Mark Casapoli. He's the Director of Veterans Affairs, Veterans Service Agency. Excuse me, I'll get that right the second time. Mark will give you a sense that how long we've been at this issue with respect to the Veterans Cemetery and what we've done in terms of how we got here. So Mark, if you want to start with that, and then I'll go through the various presentations.
So I started my position in 2020, early 2020. My predecessor had already started this project. He brought together 8 veteran leaders from around the county to help design this cemetery that we have. I know the location was already determined, and they'd already come up with a plan that the idea was we were going to be burying Ulster County veterans and their spouses for the next 100+ years. So 100+ years in that area. So that was together. They put it at National Cemetery Standards, and that's where you see the beautiful structure there. And once we kind of got things going, it was last May is when we had the groundbreaking, and we're getting close to having it finished, and it should be finished by this spring. Will be finished by this spring. So that was the history of the creation of it. We do have, like you said, more slides, and then we have a picture up here to what it's going to look like when complete.
So if you want to just back up, I just want to back up one. Yeah, I just want to take a look at the design team here, because one of the things that we did when we did this, we put together a fairly impressive design team. So Pittengarrow and Deutsch is just doing the site civil work. They're doing the engineering work on the site. We also engaged Foundry Architecture. So a lot of what you see out there in terms of aesthetics is from a local architect, and we did that on purpose. And Rick Alfondri has been with us for the entire project. We also engaged one of the landscaping consultants, which you folks are familiar with, is Bean Associates. So Bean Associates also have done a lot of work in New Paltz. I believe they did your open space plan at one point in time in the back. So we engaged them with respect to landscape architecture. And then the other one up there is a cemetery consultant. So we understood the mechanics of what had to be here with respect to a cemetery. You should know that the cemetery, the lands itself remain as lands of the New Paltz Rural Cemetery Association. They're not Ulster County lands. They remain as their lands. We have taken an easement over their lands. So the county owns an easement over their land so that we can only bury veterans on that property. And we have some control in terms of other uses associated with the property, particularly maintenance of the property. So that's how we were able to engage the Rural Cemetery Association. It was owned by the Cemetery Association before we were involved. and it was proposed as a cemetery from that association. I would also add that because we bury somewhere between 25 to 40 veterans on an annual basis, that we were one of the cemetery's largest customers, if you want to look at it that way. Next slide. Just page down to work on you. Yeah. And this just shows you that the existing veteran cemetery, the county currently buries veterans in the cemetery. If you go in the main entrance to the cemetery on the left-hand side, you'll see a cemetery area of the cemetery, which is cordoned off, that we currently are burying people at. That is full or almost full right now. So we're in a timely conclusion to try to make sure that we can open on time so that we can begin to bury veterans in the new section of the cemetery. Next slide. This just gives you an overview of the location. You can see this is the main cemetery on the left and the area that is under easement to the county on the right. There's some exceptions to that as you move in the back of the site. There's some indigenous burials that have taken place by the New Paltz Cemetery Association. They retain the right to do that. We also did quite a bit of effort. We put quite a bit of effort here into making sure that there were no Indian burials on the site. The site was considered for the work that we did. It actually was considered for a national nomination into the national park system because of the amount of material that we found on site from the Indians. We did a substantial amount of underground work and what they call radar work, ground penetrating radar work, in order to make sure that there was no Indian burials on the site. And because of that, there were some areas in the back of the site behind where you currently see the columbaria. There's some areas in the back of the site that were considered sensitive. They were originally proposed for expansion areas of the cemetery. They've now been dropped and moved out of any consideration for further burial because of the sensitivity of some of the ground penetrating radar that we saw in the next slide. Indigent, did I say indigenous?
Yeah.
It's indigent.
He meant indigent,
Yeah.
which is they can't afford, yes.
Yes, my apologies. This just shows the site in detail, a little bit close up on the site. And if you want to get a sense in terms of where you are in this picture. So if you think about this line right across here is about the end of where our cemetery currently run, this area back into here. This is reserved for some of the indigent burial, and this area over here was sensitive. Next slide. That's another look at it in terms of where we are. This is looking back. It's actually looking east over the site, and you can see the back of the original cemetery on the bottom of the site, looking towards Plains Road. Next slide. This is a concept plan that we started with that shows the concept that you're looking at that we've seen before we decided to move towards a full design work. So we laid out the concept plan. It basically shows an entryway with an alley created with plantings and a boulevard type entryway, and then a ring road around the site, and it divides the area. You'll see this, it'll divide the area up into burial sections and the columbarium in the back and the committal shelter in the middle with the flagpoles around the outside. So that there's a presence when you first drive into the site. There's a focal point when you first drive into the site. Next slide. This takes a look at the detail of the burial sections that are there. And we'll zoom in on some of those sections if you want to zoom in. Just I think the next slide zooms in a little bit. And this zooms in on the entranceway. You can see we've moved the sign back and made it smaller compared to the original concept plan that we had, mainly to make sure that we didn't have, we weren't sticking out into the road, and we wanted to make the sign more in keeping with the scale of other the rest of the cemetery works that were there. So we moved that sign back. We've also invested a substantial amount of money in the sign itself. It is a bluestone sign, not lighted, by the way. And that sign is constructed now, and it awaits the lettering to be added to it. Next slide. This is a detail of the committal shelter. And the committal shelter is, I think, about 40 by 60. And it's being used by the veterans. It has an enclosed space in the front that can be used for storage space, and there will be electric in that space as well. The only lighting in that space will be lighting associated with security lighting, and it's motion controlled. And it faces the back of the site, and it will only be used if there's anybody that actually creates a motion that would allow the lights to come on.
And it's already installed.
This lighting is, yes, and this lighting here, you can see this lighting here. That lighting is installed as it stands right now. We're having a discussion with our consultants, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't get back here right away, because we're still having discussions with our consultants with respect to that lighting. We know we will have a solution. It's just a question of which one it is, what the solution is.
There's 6 of the flags.
That's correct.
There's 6 flags.
And there's 7 flagpoles. Yeah, and that's the discussion we're having. We're having a discussion about the flagpoles, where the lights are going to go, and the strength of the lights right now. So
I'm sorry,
the consultants.
6.
No, actually, it's actually back to the site civil folks. So it's back to Pitt and Garrow and Deutsch. That's where Pitt and Garrow and Deutsch,
And they are,
the site civil engineers and the construction inspectors on the site.
and they make a decision.
We will make the decision. No, we being the county, right? But we will come back to you with anything with respect to that decision in terms of where we are. I can tell you where we're going to head, but I think we will come back to you. If that's what you want us to do, we'll come back to you with any of those decisions that we make.
Can you explain to that? Who's the county? When the county makes the decision?
Well, there's 3 agencies or 4 agencies involved with the planning department, DPW, veterans, and the legislature. So all 4 agencies were involved in terms of the design. So the 3 agencies that will be involved in terms of trying to find solutions to the lighting would be the planning department, and the civil engineer, obviously the site civil engineer, and our friends at DPW, as well as veterans.
DPW, planning, and veterans. So those 3 agencies will come up with a proposal.
I think we're going to probably come up with a solution and then take take that solution back to you if that's what you want. But I think we're going to come up with a solution.
Oh, wait, I count 5 groups: DPW, veterans, the legislature, planning, and the civil engineer.
Well, the civil engineer is a group. He works for us.
He's planning.
He works for the county of Ulster.
Yeah, consultant.
And
A lot
so
of people.
if the decision is made by the 3 agencies you mentioned,
Yes.
and how does one feel the decision?
One would presume that what we won't have to appeal the decision. We'll be able to work our way through this so that you're satisfied in terms of the decision.
For an optimist, for an Irishman, I am.
There you go.
I am this, but
There
I
you-
appreciate your
there-
optimism.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear that. the
Well-
locality-
What was the question? Well, what ended up happening is the county, under something called a balancing of public interest test, went to the town of New Paltz and the village of New Paltz and went through all of the necessary approvals at that level in order for us to essentially be able to construct the project. So if you want to ask me if they're involved in terms of what the solution is, my answer to you is that when I said you folks, well, if you want us to come back to us, I would mean that the community leaders could come back to us as well.
Finding out that, was that for this situation? No.
No, I don't believe so. It's an apartment site.
Just a generic
Yeah.
hearing notice that every project gets.
This is,
An example.
this is no, this is no different than when the village was building the fire station. They did not go before the town planning because
I was wondering, basic question, what's the need for light at all?
So the lighting is only there for the flagpoles. That's the only reason it's there. And then also and then for security purposes only. So the only reason the lighting is there for the flagpoles, and then the second reason is for security purposes. And the security lighting is only on motion control. That's the only lighting that's on site.
The rural cemetery, which by the way is totally overshadowed by these huge stone signs, and you would hardly know there's a rural cemetery in the middle of all this. But it's never been lit, except for the one flag.
So the point being is that we now have a fairly substantial investment in the structure on the site. We want to make sure that the structure is not vandalized. Security lighting that's motion controlled is typically not considered an intrusion into a neighborhood.
But that's different from lighting for flags.
So, I'm sorry.
Priority.
I would think protection of a structure is a priority. Whether it is the priority, I don't know what that means.
No, actually, if we're gonna try to record this meeting, we should probably make it a little bit more orderly. So if folks want to come up and talk or ask questions, probably come to the table so the mic can pick up your voice. So you want to, I think that would be.
Does anybody want me to finish the presentation or not? So when you look at this presentation, you see in the back here, the columbarium in the back. And then there's a substantial amount of landscaping in and around the communal shelter. And then there's landscaping at the front of the site and the landscaping also just off of here, back behind the site in this area here, there's a substantial amount of landscaping that goes back behind the columbarium as well. So I think the next slide, I think that may be it. So from a design perspective, one of the things that we looked at in terms of the stone cladding that we're using on the facilities, we looked at the area in and around the Shawangunk Preserve and the Shawangunk Mountains. We looked at what they call the Shawangunk conglomerate in terms of choosing some of the color palette for the site itself. Next slide. And this gives you a sense of what the sign was originally designed to look like and how we shrunk it down since that particular sign came through in the original concept drawing. We've shrunk that sign, I would say, almost by 40% in terms of its size. Next slide. This is the columbarium, which are in the back. Again, the stone cladding is reminiscent of the Shawangunk Preserve, and the granite that we're using is also reminiscent of some of the Shawangunk conglomerate that's on the site itself. So the granite is those areas that essentially close up the columbarium niches.
Dennis, could you speak to the size of those? It does not appear to match the human scale in that image.
So there are four, I gotta remember them now, they're 4 foot high, four niches high. And they're 80 on a side. I know that I can't speak to the scale, I just don't have them. But they stand a little higher than that image right now because of the bases that are on them. But they are about I would say I've been down there looking at them, I'd say they're about a foot over my head. So I'm 5'10".
They're considerably above that image.
I don't know whether they're considerably above that image, but they are above that image. Next slide. Any questions? Next slide. This is the detail of the column of the communal shelter. It shows the roof line of the shelter. It shows some of the areas that are looking at for support, and it shows that area in the back of the shelter, which faces Plains Road. That is an enclosed space, and that enclosed space is used for storage and other types of facilities that will be there when the veterans hold their burials or any special events that take place on the site. It's burial shelter. If you want to do that, it's just a shelter. It's called a communal shelter, but it's just for the ceremonies that take place on the site. That help you? Next slide. This right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mainly used for storage space, what it is. Yeah, that's correct. Next slide. And then we just answered some of the questions that we'd answered in terms of site utilization, what's out there, what our anticipated water usage is going to be, what our traffic demands are going to be. And we provided that information back to the town. Next slide. And then this is to further, going through some of the questions or frequently asked questions that we had with respect to our interaction with the town. And then finally, the last slide. And this is our environmental review. The county did act as lead agency for the project. We issued a negative declaration in March of this year. No, of last year, March 22. We issued a negative declaration for the project. The next slide. And we went through a balancing of,
Negative declaration. The environmental review was made by the county.
that's correct.
The environmental review was filed where?
It's filed at the county level and with the appropriate agencies, including those involved agencies, which include the town and the village.
Okay, so the village has a copy of that environmental review and the town? You have the copies? Yes?
Yeah, and I'm more than willing to provide them.
I would like to see them because I'm wondering, do they cover lights?
Yep.
They do?
Mhm.
I'm looking at the mayor and the supervisor.
I mean, I don't remember. It was a long time since we got it, but if Dennis says it does, I would trust
So
what
you
Dennis says.
described the lighting that is already installed, and you described the environmental impact of the lighting, and you found no negative impact.
So
I'm asking, is that true?
I'd have to go back and look at it. I'm not sure that at the time that we were looking at flagpole lights or not flagpole lights.
And
Yeah. So let me go back and look at it. I know we were talking about full cutoff lights at one point in time. And uplighting for the flagpoles may or may not have been discussed. I'd have to go back and look.
the original lights,
I will still have to go back and look.
you let us know.
I will let you know. I'll give you a copy of the report. All right, and then we went through the balance of public interest test.
Here, Kim, why don't you-
town and village knowing and the about the plan. Is that into zoning kind of stuff, or is that something separate?
So Dennis, if we talk about
I
the
would-
balance, he's gonna get to that.
That's
right
what I
now.
was trying to get
Okay,
to.
because the reason I'm bringing it up is that I have all the documentation I could find online. And it talked at one point about the village and the town being involved. Then there was another document basically saying the village and the town signed off. And that they weren't, having anything to do with it. It was more or less going to be
So
a county
under-
issue.
Under
because
a balance of public interest, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You want to finish your statement?
Oh, so I'm just trying to find out which was correct, what I read. It looked like the one was an after,
Well,
meaning what the current thing is right now is that they're not going to challenge anything you want to do as far as zoning or anything like that.
and the
Is
short
that-
answer is they're both correct. Let me explain that. A balance of public interest test is essentially what the county and other entities that are essentially approaching governments have an ability to essentially ask the communities for relief from their zoning statute. So what we did in the case of New Paltz, both at the town level and at the village level, because the site is split between a town-village boundary line, is we went to both planning boards and asked them for relief from their zoning statute. The status of case law right now does not say which entity essentially makes that determination. My understanding is both the village and the town planning board asked their respective boards as to who should make that recommendation or that decision, and it was decided that at the town level, that the town would make, the town planning board would make the decision, and at the village level, that the village planning board should make that decision. So the county was granted by those decisions, limited immunity from the zoning statute. In essence, what we were granted is that the zoning statute would not control the county's construction of this facility.
Zoning,
The village planning board. Those hearing notifications,
Well, but there is a public hearing associated with those decisions, so
Yeah.
there's a public notice that's put out that there'll be a public hearing and people can come and make comments. When we have public hearings, we don't put notes out on everyone's doors, but we do publish it in the New Paltz Times. And we post it on the town and village's websites. And we say there's gonna be a public hearing, we're gonna be discussing this, please come, make a public comment, and then there's a vote.
okay, so the people directly affected, like I live literally across the street, I'm not, I have to read the New Paltz Times.
Yeah, I mean, we don't
It's
send
on me,
letters out.
it's on me to find the Is that correct? Is that what you're saying? I
That's-
just want, please,
That's how it's
I'm
done.
not after you. I'm just
No, I
trying to.
think that's
Please,
how
be
we
clear.
we public notice for all of our meetings.
But I have to buy a newspaper to find out.
It's on the village and town's website as well.
All right, so again, I have to have a
Yes, it is
computer.
on- yes, the burden is on you, and I agree that times have changed, a lot of people don't read the paper, and we should probably find a better way of giving you the information. that you need.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It
That's
makes,
that's how I feel as the village board. member.
I think it's posted on the top.
Posted for a notice. I only do it on the town planning, meeting, then it's first thing to us.
it makes it very difficult to participate in.
Hi, so I'm Eve Walter. I'm your county legislator representing Village of New Paltz. I'm also was on the chair of the planning board when this came to the village, and I'm also was the chair of the committee that approved it on the county level. So I feel like I have a lot of responsibility in this situation. I will say I also was not aware of the concerns until the mayor brought them to my attention. And I really appreciate that I now know that these are concerns. And I will say that I'm committed at this point to serve as that liaison and making sure that the concerns that you're addressing are being brought up in the county and that I understand what the solutions are and get them back to you. I did not know before. I will say in terms of the village planning board approving it, it wasn't made available to other people in any outgoing way. I will say as the chair, we were basically presented with this idea that says, when the county wants to do something, the decision is made as to whether the county can take lead agency. Can they be in charge of this? And that's a simpler process, we were told by our attorneys, because that's just one sort of agency that's kind of making those kinds of decisions. So we voted in favor of it. Whether it was the right thing to do or not, I don't know. We didn't have many opportunities of having a situation where the county said we want to take lead agency. We were advised by our attorneys that this was illogical and there was no reason not to. And we had the support of the village board and the town board. So let's allow the county to do it. I will say that the county planning board has representation from New Paltz on it. So it's not like when it went to the county planning board, we weren't there. It does have representation from across the whole county of other members, but we do have a member who sits on that so that they could be a part of it.
I would also like to say,
So every municipality has a representation on the county planning board. And so in our case, it's Bill
Bill,
Murray.
and I'm the alternate. I've only gone to one meeting as the alternate for Bill. At the time this happened, I was on the town planning board, not the chair, but my experience was almost identical to Eve's on the town planning board.
So
Where we were basically told that like, this is how we do it. This is what it's done. This is the easiest way to get through this. And to some extent, it felt like it was a done deal. And there was like we didn't really have a chance to really.
let me just give a chance to finish it. Continue on. So I will say that is unfortunate, and I think it's important to know now, whenever there is something with the county wanting to be lead agency, that it is important that we're sure that the community is aware of these kinds of things, because you're absolutely right, it does affect you. At the time, it also seemed minimal. It seemed like a smaller project, I will be quite honest. I will say, and Dennis, both of you are very well aware of it. I expressed tremendous concerns about the growth of this project from when I understood it on the planning board. I was alone in the legislature in expressing concern about the growth of this project in the size and in the cost. It had tripled from 1 million to $3 million. That said, it's at this point, just to go forward, I just wanted to speak to something that someone said before. How will we know? How will we hear? So I'm just saying that I'm committed now to make sure that I can be that liaison, that I can make sure that I have a clear sense of all your concerns, and I will connect with Dennis and his team, find out how they're addressing it, and get them back to you through your village mayor and town supervisor. And so
And I'll also say, under town law, what happens when cemeteries, if they fill up and they stop getting revenue, and they get abandoned, the towns have to take them over. And so if you don't make when I talked to Dennis about this, if your cemetery isn't viable for the long term, with enough space and enough people being buried there, and a strong connection, especially with veterans, which makes a strong connection, that those cemeteries eventually get abandoned and the towns have to take over all of the costs of those for thousands and thousands of dollars a year. And so you want to make sure that those cemeteries have viable long-term plans, and working with the county and with the veterans is probably one of the best ways to make sure that happens.
I would just add to what you're saying about viability of the rural small cemetery. Because they had a huge field that they could very organically begin to fill as a natural cemetery, as a natural extension with veterans or without veterans. There was no end in sight of the possible burial plots for New Paltz, whether town or village. So I'm sorry, I do not agree that the rural cemetery was in financial danger.
I don't know where they are, but I know many of them are
There's
closing.
Plenty of burial plots, and there is less so. Now, very few New Paltz residents will have a home in the next 100 years because we have limited it to one single segment of the Ulster County population. Now, do I agree with that? I have no problem with that.
New York State is,
Problem that my grandchildren will not have a place to be buried in New Paltz.
I think the
That
state
is a
allows
separate
composting now.
discussion. But you're using that as an excuse.
I'm not using it as an
Rubber
excuse.
stamping is inexcusable.
We didn't rubber stamp it.
Why don't I bring the mic to you? How's that work?
Thank you. So I'm Jamie Uhlenbrock. My neighbors know me. I live at number 65. I am your direct neighbor. My bedroom windows face onto the cemetery, the new cemetery. I just want to say that I had heard from the cemetery caretaker some years ago that this plan was afoot, that the big field that I have enjoyed looking at as an agricultural field for 42 years, I knew that someday it was going to stop being this pleasurable view for me and that it would be something else. And of course, my great fear was that it would be a housing project. At one point, I knew the cemetery was having financial difficulty and they sold land to Ferranti so that they could raise more money. So anyway, I personally am not opposed to the idea, and I don't think any of us here are opposed to the idea that there is a veteran cemetery in that field. Okay, I personally would prefer to see a veteran cemetery than I would see a whole bunch of houses. On the other hand, and this is all water under the bridge, it's irksome to me that we were not notified that this planning was afoot. I'm friendly with the cemetery caretaker and we happened to have a conversation and he told me this. So I share Patty's kind of chagrin that the immediate residents were not at all brought into this discussion as we should have been, okay? Now, this is not an issue of whether there should be a veteran cemetery or not, and it could have been somewhere else. And, the issue is the lighting. I would like to look out my bedroom window and see the stars. And when that big lighting is there, I will no longer see the stars. So I do not see big lighting in the old New Paltz, former, or I should say the present New Paltz Veteran Cemetery. There's no big lighting there. It is a charming spot. I often walk there. And my impression was that the new field, that the field right next door to my house was going to look similar. And then the building started and I said, okay, so now there's a building, there's this, there's that, you know. I can't control that. That, you know, as part of my view shed now, there's nothing I can control about that. And I'm glad that the veterans are going to have, you know, a cemetery. From my personal point of view, from an aesthetic point of view, I find it overly pretentious and inappropriate for a rural road like New Paltz, but that has nothing to do with the issues. Okay, the issue is the lighting, and I'm concerned, and I share Patty's concern that you say we will come up with a solution. We're going to let you know what it is.
So let me just,
I want to know that when you come up with a solution, you come back to us.
and I thought I was clear that I was committed to do that. If not, I certainly
That
am.
wasn't the impression I got.
Certainly, he was committed.
There was confusion when you said that the county, the people overlooking things would come up with a solution and then come back. And you seem to reject the idea of coming up with a proposal and then meeting.
Oh, I just called it a different thing. I certainly
that's
wasn't, I was not implying that there would be a solution without conversation. So I, and while I certainly, if I did, then I apologize for that. But one of the things that why don't we talk about solutions that we are currently considering?
I just
Okay, that's fine.
I just have another, I mean, it's not an issue. I have motion sensitive lights in my backyard. Because I'm right next to the cemetery and there's nothing behind me. And sometimes people decide that they're going to walk across my backyard in the middle of the night. And so I have motion sensitive lights, although they're very small. And they're going on and off all night long when the deer go by, as they do. So you're going to have these security lights that are going to be going on and off all night long because the deer are going to be walking through the cemetery. I mean, it's nothing that anybody can control, but I suppose.
I think it's important.
Okay. So I have said what I.
Can we do that? Just so we can record all the. No, let's just. Come sit here just so we can make sure we capture.
If you're correct in saying that their motion detector lights, then that could be a problem for some of the residents. A solution for the flagpole is to take the flag down every night and put it up every morning. And so why can't that be done? The caretaker could do it. You could pay him an extra whatever. And so at least you won't have the constant light. Now, the lights on and off, I don't know what to do about that. But I just think you should just take down the flag. I keep a light on the flag of my house. I'm the widow of a veteran. And so I'm following the rules. All you have to do is follow the rules. Take it down, put it up. That's my solution.
Could you give us your name when anybody on your feet?
Oh, yeah, Rose Rudnitsky.
Oh, I would.
My colleague Jamie.
Someone want to come
And Jamie, yes.
and speak next? Charlotte?
I just wanted to say that, you know, I have no objection to anything that was done, that it's a done deal. That building is there. I personally don't think it's very attractive, but that's the way it goes. My only issue is with the lights. And I think that there's a solution, there's a solution to that. And I also agree that the immediate neighbors, somebody could have, you know, notified the immediate neighbors, you know, the people whose bedrooms are going to be lit up when these lights go on. And also motion lights can be directed, you know, so that the area that would trigger those lights to go on could probably be easily isolated. And I too would like to see somebody hired and paid to put the flag up and take it down. I mean, we have all that electricity going you know, for no good, because nobody really cares. No one around here cares if there are lights, you know, lighting up the cemetery. I don't think that we've ever had any vandalism in the cemetery, you know, and I can understand the concern because there was money spent on the building. But I think that the light issue could be resolved. And I think everybody here would be happy with something like that. More so than, you know, like being offended that we didn't get to sign off on the design or whatever.
You are.
Right across from the cemetery.
You guys want to sit down? You've been standing for an hour now. It's really not fair. We all get to lounge around and. Okay, sure. My name is Vincent Variano. I live 4 houses away from the older portion of the Veteran Cemetery. So I'm good. I brought some prepared statements. My wife can't make it as well. And I'm going to try to veer away from the stuff that was already covered about the lack of any kind of interaction or feedback. Hopefully you understand how important it is in a small community like this. And thank you very much. I did read about how you stood up for the situation early on. So thank you very much as well. The Plains Road community is a unique and special historic district in the unique and special area of New Paltz. Above us on the ridge is the university. Below us in the valley is the river. And running through us is the beautiful and peaceful rail trail. As a resident, I treasure this special place. As an amateur astronomer, I bought my house on a road with no streetlights, so as to enjoy the night sky in all its natural beauty. As we ponder our way forward, let's listen to what the National Institute of Health says about light pollution. It wastes energy, affects astronomers and scientists, disrupts bird migration and the ecological balance, and is linked to negative consequences to human health. In reporting on this project in the Daily Freeman on May 5th, 2022, the Ulster County legislators approved the project cost increase from $270,000 to $2,800,000 and declared that the expansion project would have no significant environmental impact on the area. In the article, the deputy county executive stated that the county would work with the developer to identify savings. Well, considering the current and future costs of electricity, it seems to me like we have identified the savings. Eliminate all lighting. Now for my wife, thank you very much for this, to that. As an individual residing in the Plains Road community and daughter of a veteran buried with honor at the New Paltz Rural Cemetery and a health practitioner, I have many concerns about the potential environmental impacts caused by the current proposal regarding lighting at the new Veteran Cemetery. Tonight, I will limit my remarks to the impacts upon our residents' sleep. According to the National Sleep Foundation, the body's natural circadian rhythms that contribute to one's health, growth, and sense of well-being are seriously impacted by environmental light. In particular, sleep patterns have been shown to be most affected by light 1 hour after waking and 2 hours prior to bedtime, lasting throughout the night. Light exposure at night is said to be like a resetting of your body's natural clock, causing wakefulness at the wrong time of the day by disturbing the brain signal to produce melatonin. Whether the lighting is indoors or outdoors, such as streetlights, floodlights, artificial light at night disturbs sleep patterns and has been scientifically linked to increased morbidity and mortality, including strokes, heart attacks, workplace injuries, automobile accidents, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and suicidality. In fact, the NSF's position paper on the elimination of daylight saving time notes the above factors as reasons to return to daylight savings time. As noted in countless scientific reports on the deleterious impact of nighttime lighting on sleep patterns, extended use of light at night should be controlled or totally eliminated when not completely necessary. And then she found this incredible statement here in the 2015 RAND report, Sleep and the Military States. In the introductory paragraph, and they were quoting Major General Aubrey Newman. In peace and war, the lack of sleep works like termites in a house. Below the surface, gnawing quietly and unseen to produce gradual weakening, which can lead to sudden and unexpected collapse. So thank you very much for listening. Again, from both my wife's and I's opinion, elimination of lighting is the only decent thing to do in this case. Please consider that as one of your solutions moving forward. Considering that you have ignored our input on pretty much every other aspect of this at this critical juncture, I think that would be very important that you do that. Thank you very much.
Anybody else want to share a statement?
My name is Kim Squillis. I live at 63 Plains Road. I'm actually Jamie's neighbor. I've lived there for over 30 years. I also have a lot of background in security, and while I can appreciate, security lights, I can appreciate them. But on a building that's built out of brick, that has no windows, no real sides, there's not much damage that can actually be done to the building. Graffiti, yes. But I understand building a project, it's always good to build something in, you might never have to use it. So I am asking that those security lights or motion detector lights, since they're already installed, at no time be used unless it's warranted, meaning that there's vandalism where they have to be put on. I'm also in favor of, one of the persons said it about having the staff of the cemetery lower and raise the flag every day. I can't understand why that there has to be 7 lights, number one. The American flag, I know many places, if not all, you have to light the American flag if it's going to be out at night. It's out of respect and it's the right thing to do. Totally agree with that. But my solution would be actually to have the staff, they live right there, put it up, take it down. As far as the other flags, if we did have to illuminate the American flag, the other flags don't have to be illuminated. All right, they don't have to be. So that'd be 1 light instead of 7 lights. Down the road, you have the entrance to this, to the cemetery. You have the very nice, it says Ulster County Cemetery there, and it's recognizing each branch of the service by a beautiful medallion that's displayed. Now, I don't know what these other flags are going to be. Are they going to represent each branch of the service? Is that why they're there? I don't know. But there could have been some talk about that, having the medallions continue, be consistent with what you have at the other end. Because our understanding, my understanding very early on with this project, and I knew very little about it, except for a sign that was posted with a site plan that looks nothing like this. Okay. My understanding was that it was going to be an extension, meaning that we were just putting more people buried there. I saw the big building like Jamie and everybody else going up, and I said, well, if it's raining, it would be a nice place to have a pavilion to be able to go into and have a little ceremony. So I wasn't totally against it. I was totally confused about what that other box was. Now I'm finding out it's storage. So, I mean, I don't think it's a very attractive building myself, but it's there, okay? It's there. All right, and we want to respect our veterans, and we all love our veterans. My father was a World War II veteran. Okay, the other part of the cemetery does have a light on the flagpole. It's solar. They have a light at the top and a light at the bottom. And they also have solar lights that control their sign. So I just wish that it was a little bit more consistent and an actual extension of what we already have, since it's basically the same respectful area for our veterans.
Like to add that the flag code. You have to go all the way over here. Flag code suggests that the honorable way to treat the flag is to raise it in the morning and to lower it in the evening. And the only time it should be up at night is when there is a desire for a patriotic effect. Then it must be illuminated. But I ask you to think about the idea of desire for a patriotic effect on a rural road, in a rural cemetery at 4 o'clock in the morning on a non-government site. So I am in full agreement with everyone who has asked that the flags be lowered, that there be no lights, and that we remember that the real honor of the flag is to do that, and that everything else is just a desire. And that desire is opposed to our desire for peace at night, our desire to see the stars, our desire to see the lightning bugs and the butterflies and the animals that go through the field at night. That's what we're asking. Thank you very much.
As Dennis had mentioned earlier, we are working with our consultant and we're looking at making some possible. What we've already been discussing for weeks since we received the email, to find out first, why was it lit like a huge beacon? And that was because the construction workers, they had it, all the lights there shining on one spot. So that's the reason why it just looked so, bright in the way it was like a beacon of light there.
Like a war zone.
Yeah, so understanding that, like Dennis had said, turn it off. What's going on with this? Why are these lights set up like that? The idea is, like you said, 7 lights for the different flagpoles. What's supposed to be in the plans and what we're going to make sure of tomorrow is that dimmable lights, number one, that it's not something that's just, pure as high of a beam as it can be shooting up into the sky. If the solutions work out and everybody's okay, American flag would remain lit, and that would be the only flag that would be lit. We wouldn't consider lighting the other flags because we hear you. We understand that all of that light could be a detriment. Number two, I don't know if the cemetery is capable of doing a flag raising and a flag lowering every day. I can't surmise that. I have no idea. I don't know what the cost is on them. The burden, I can't answer that. I can't speak to that. They're a not-for-profit rural cemetery run by a board with their caretaker. So we'll look at the solutions to just try to limit and make sure that we're not affecting the neighbors with the significant light. So tomorrow we have that meeting. Yes.
Saying, what you're projecting is a great idea. Raising and lowering the flag every day. And we'll use the money that we were gonna spend on electricity to feed the rural cemetery to do that.
I'm not saying that I'm not saying that we don't agree with you. On military installations, flags are raised and lowered every day, and that's how I've been through. What I'm saying is I can't commit to anybody doing that. If the cemetery is willing to do it, yeah. I said if the cemetery is willing to do it, it's a burden on them. But if they are, something that could be considered. can't say that I can't say we could commit to paying anybody or paying anything. I don't know how that would really flush out. I have.
So can we, yeah, can we start from a place of going back to your people and going back, including the cemetery, and asking them, saying, this is the issue that's on the table. What solutions might the rural cemetery have? Maybe he'd love to do that. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe it's absolutely not possible. He has a full-time job. He works nights, so I don't even know that, like, sunrise and like there's a question there. But looking into whether that's a possibility, and if it's not, then moving to other things. But what I heard from you was, I'm going to assume that I can't control that, so I'm going to go to this other solution. Whereas I think it would be helpful to us to hear that we can try to find this other solution that meets the needs of us. I mean, it's almost ironic. One of our neighbors who lives across the street from the cemetery signs her emails Queen of Outer Space. She's that much of a astronomy lover. And so I think that hearing what the issue is here and all the levels that people came in with health reasons, they came in with astronomy reasons, they've come with all kinds of sleep, just general sleep. And yes, we cannot control what our neighbors do. We don't own their property, but we can try to impact that. And I think what everyone here is saying is we need you to hear how important this issue is to us and seek a solution that might meet our needs before stepping over that to other solutions. Does that make sense?
Understood.
Okay.
And that was the intention.
Yeah.
One is, isn't it part of the flag code that it shouldn't be left up in inclement weather?
Unless it's an all-weather flag, which it is.
Okay. And I lost what the other one is.
So what, and the intention and your point's completely valid. We're gonna come with multiple solutions, not one. And that's why I said I wasn't sure, and I don't know what the burden would be on New Paltz Rural. Doesn't mean we're not gonna ask. I'm not gonna talk to John, who's the caretaker. So I'm sorry if that wasn't clear enough, but I'm also saying we're gonna look at other solutions that we hope fit to what is needed in the neighborhood there. And we'll present them what we have.
Commitment, the commitment tonight, you can, Eve, do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll just say that, as I said before, I have now heard that this is a concern. I will absolutely be meeting with them, finding out what their plan is, questioning their plan if it doesn't feel like it's addressing your issues, and getting to a solution. What it would help me to know is the best way to get that information back to you. And so I think they definitely heard what the concerns are, and I've definitely heard, and I think the mayor, supervisor, and village trustee have heard. So for me, because I think probably you're all as hungry as I am, want to have dinner, what is the best way to share with you the progress and the proposed solutions for you to consider?
Another meeting.
So should we set a specific time for that, and then we will commit to having something by that date?
Yeah, you think it may be a bit, so you got to give us at least 2 weeks, I would think, at a
But
minimum.
a month from now, is that too long? So I'm Eve.Walter at County Ulster US, and why you can find me on the website. I mean, that's way too long, but if you look under your legislature for New Paltz, you'll see it.
You reached out to the mayor, who reached out directly to me. and there's a-
Patty and I could be the.
There's a long email chain with respect to that. We'll respect that email chain back and forth. That to me is rather than start a whole new email chain,
Yes.
that email chain is already in existence. We'll go back and forth with respect to that email chain.
Whether it's 3 weeks from now, a month from now, 2 weeks from now.
I have my calendar in front
That
of you,
we
so.
can actually just update.
But for my, if I may, Patty, thank you. I just wanted to say that we did hear you tonight. We heard what we're looking at. One of the things I think that you could take away from the commitment tonight is to only like the American flag.
No, I don't.
A commitment on our side the next commitment, let me finish.
I'm
correct?
reading.
The
Okay.
next commitment is to look into whether or not there is a possibility in terms of raising and lowering the flag. Looking at the staffing that's gonna be needed. One would suspect if the Cemetery Association is currently lighting their flag, that's gonna be an issue for them. That's the only thing I would say.
I think the consensus in the room is that.
I heard the consensus.
Okay, that there be no lights in the cemetery.
Yeah, I heard that.
Not one American flag, but no lights. How that manifests in implementation, we don't know. Whether the cemetery does it, whether a veteran volunteers to come out and raise and lower the flag is another possibility. Whether someone on the road comes out and does it. Whether the county comes out and does it. I'm trying to think outside the box, because all of this needs to be outside of the box. Because we've been cramped by the usual way of doing things. So,
Neil found something really out of the box.
I'm sorry?
Neil found something really out of the box. It's
The
automatic
automatic
flagpole.
The automatic one, yeah. Right there, well, one of the things we've actually looked at.
So I think the county is going to be looking at these things and come back with a bunch of ideas. One idea is an automatic pole. It goes up and down by itself with a
That would
photo
be a
cell.
positive use of electricity.
So I wouldn't, everything I've worked on with Dennis, they've worked on very hard. I think they're open to discussing it and finding a solution. And like, I just Googled this, but they already looked at it. So.
Yeah.
And
Already,
you told me in
Yeah.
a meeting that the planning board on the county level tried to always do
we're,
dark sky
We're-
compliant, so. like,
we're never happy with,
Well,
we're never happy with uplight. I'm never happy with uplight.
Dennis, you're quoted in the New York Times talking about the lack of municipal codes to protect people from, do you remember this?
Must have been a real bad day for me, actually.
People from light pollution.
No, I mean, we've
Last summer.
we've led a charge and with respect to light pollution and it's on me for not catching this in the initial designs relative to this and that's all I'll say. The initial designs, we should have picked up on this right away. And it's on me for not catching it.
Committed to working on this, and again, we've heard you, they've heard you. I promise that I have no vested interest in any way except to be sure that your interests are heard. And so if you schedule with the mayor, let's have a time in whatever number of weeks. And I will do my due diligence between that time to really make sure and hear what they have to say and complain if I don't like it, because if I don't think it's matching what you're saying, I promise I'll do that. They know I do it a lot to them. And so, and then hopefully when we come back at the next meeting, there'll be a proposal that you're happy with.
I'm just gonna add, I know almost everybody in the room. If there's someone who is not on the list or hasn't received emails, or if you know anybody who wants to be on the list, please grab me before we leave. Because I want to make sure that as the mayor and I communicate about the next meeting, that we don't lose anybody. And it's great.
And I'll just add that if you come up with a brilliant idea tomorrow or the next day that you hadn't thought before, you can find my email on the legislative website. It's way too long to say. Keith Walter, and feel free to shoot ideas that haven't been mentioned. If it's been mentioned, I promise you've heard it. But if it haven't been mentioned, feel free to shoot it, and I will bring it to the conversation.
And I would say the same thing to me and Patty has my email, as you know, more than willing to listen and more than willing to sit down and meet. And I hope what happened here tonight is an indication of that willingness, rather than a sense that we just came here and have no indication that we're going to do anything. We will do something. I like that.
How about Neil's idea?
Wasn't right. They already had it.
We had actually already looked at it.
All the technology, they must have some way of doing this.